Welcome to Set Life. I'm Amber Buteau, and this is
Kelly Leger.
And we are in studio today with another friend of the studio and a dear friend of mine, Terry Weaver. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
you bet.
So, fun facts. I love fun facts. Terry and I met.
I was going to ask you about that.
Okay, yes. We met working at the same church. He had the office next to my office.
Oh, wow.
A long time ago. We had no idea that either one of us would end up in production, go on in life, go different ways. He goes on his, I go on mine. Neither one of us working at the church anymore. Lo and behold, he's acting in Breaking Strongholds, which is shot in Montgomery, Texas. And goes on, and I had no idea, acts, writes, the director of marketing for Breaking Strongholds, all these things in films, right? Working on a feature yourself now. And has been in a bunch of projects. What a small world, right?
Small world.
Small world.
Actually, where they filmed Breaking Strongholds, me and my wife, or at least one of the locations, I guess, me and my wife got married at that venue. And I found out when we were there in Montgomery.
Okay.
At Hodgepodge Lodge.
Yeah.
And Jeff Angel, the owner, is a dear, dear friend of mine.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. And I was like, and then I found, and he was forever, has actually been trying to introduce me to the Breaking Strongholds. That's the name of the movie, Breaking Strongholds.
TV series.
TV series. Breaking Strongholds crew. He wanted to introduce us. So it's funny that all this we got to hear.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow, cool.
So very cool. And even the church, I think that do I know the church that you guys are both
the
at?
Ark.
Awesome. Okay,
Yes.
so I know that Matt and all those guys really well.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Good people.
Yeah, good people. And look, it took all of this to get us all under one roof here at For the One.
I know.
Right?
Amazing.
I mean, God does all this to get us all in one spot.
Here we are.
To have a conversation, and here it is today.
Very cool.
So now we're going to learn all about Terry today.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Terry, we're going to hear your story today. How did you get into the industry?
My first real acting gig, I think it was an answer to prayers, but I can't prove that. I had met this movie producer at a fundraiser that I was helping out with, and we just shook hands and went on our way. And I'd been praying for God to use me to shine his light for like 7 months. And I get a phone call out of the blue. That's the way I thought.
Sure.
And I found out that it was Carla, the producer for this TV series. She had done a movie before about a veteran who returns from war, and I knew about that. I knew she was doing some good stuff, and I kind of felt like she was going to ask me to be a part of something. And we didn't get to talk that night. We talked the next day. She asked me to come audition for a television show. So I was praying for God to use me to shine his light, and I got cast in this show. I didn't know this, but our anchor verse is John 1:5. It says, "Light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it." So I think that's a pretty good indicator that God's involved.
Sure, absolutely.
But like I say, I can't prove it, so
Sure.
I like to leave room for skeptics. And yeah.
I mean, just to have a shoot with an anchor scripture is pretty good, heading in the right direction.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. That whole production I've met Carla, great individual, just a massive heart for God and spreading the gospel through media. Reflective Media is her company, correct? And,
Reflective Media Productions. Yep.
And a lot of great work. She's done a lot of great work for the kingdom in the industry. And so before I had already met you and knew you, but I didn't know that you were working with her. And I met her and talked with her, and then she explained to me that y'all all work together. And I was like, oh my gosh, again, another really small world of how God just brings his kids all together and lets us create. It's fun times.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Okay, so what age did you start acting?
I started doing promotional videos really kind of right out of the military. That's really when we had a smartphone that could record and do a decent job, and you could edit it. At least that's when I was capable of doing that stuff. So back in 2003, 2004, but I was doing it to do marketing. So I was putting together marketing videos for what I was selling at the time. I went to school for marketing at Texas A&M.
Okay.
And so I learned a little bit about marketing. When I went and got my first job out of college, I'd been in the military, was an older student. I thought, I got to have a brand. So I became the rig sailor.
Oh.
The rig, like a big rig.
Okay.
Sailor. I was in the Navy. So my brand was me in a Navy uniform with a big truck behind me. I was the rig sailor. And I would do these promotional videos where I would show the trucks that I just sold and talk about all the specs. And
Wow.
yeah.
How about that?
How about
Like
it?
making a character
Sailor.
for yourself.
Come on. Yeah.
So we've sat with Rick Sailor today,
Oh, my goodness.
and we sit with
Oh,
Buck-
yeah. Buck Trevor.
Buck Trevor.
Buck Trevor from K-Star Country. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
what an
we're-
eclectic group we have.
Yeah, we have. It's great to see that creatives are just creatives.
Yeah.
Right. You
Yep.
know, that we had
Yeah.
an interview. We did an interview on another episode of the show where he was a radio talent. And in the beginning of his career, he was also building a brand for himself. And he was an African American on radio. The first gig he got was a country radio station. And so he had to make up, you know, his personality.
Yeah.
And so he was
Buck Trevor.
Trevor.
But he had the
And so-
country accent and the whole thing, you know, and it's
Yeah.
like he made a big deal, a big joke about him
Yeah.
being African American, nobody knowing he was African American on
Yeah,
a country
on a
network.
country.
When they finally saw him in some parade, they're like, Buck Trevor's African American? And all his other African American brothers and sisters was like, yeah, Buck's African American. You know, it was a
Yeah.
great story. It was
Yeah.
hilarious. It was so much fun.
But it's, you know, being that creative from the kind of jump, you know, like you're like, I'm just going to try to market. But in that, being creative enough to go, okay, I'm ex-military, Navy, right? And I'm selling these things. How do I make, you made yourself a character. You know, he made himself a character. That's just, I don't know if you know this or not, but that's not normal. Like people can't just come up with characters in their head. And I think that's one of the coolest things. Getting to sit in the seat is sit with a bunch of people that watching their creativity foster and just things that they touch and do. And
being able to
you know,
monetize it, just like
Yeah.
people can come up with a lot of funny stuff at the dinner table, but being able to take something like that,
yeah.
you know, that's kudos for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, so we're sailor rig sailor here. Then where did it go from there?
I did all kinds of like promotional videos, but then I started doing, you've heard of guerrilla marketing. I
Yeah.
started a nonprofit back in 2013, and we held events. And the way that we would draw people in is we would do these guerrilla marketing videos where we would get out like on Lake Woodlands on a swan, and we would do promotional videos for events and stuff like that. So the cool thing about storytelling or putting yourself on a video is you do the work once and it can travel.
Yeah.
And it can make a mark on people if you do it right. I didn't understand the power of storytelling or what brand was all about until I got into acting, started studying story, and got into like character acting. And that really started, you know, back in 2019 when I started playing a detective on this show, Breaking Strongholds. And since I've played some other roles. But I'm a writer too, so I understand story, and story's powerful. You know, I was just writing about these movies that have left a mark on generations.
Yeah.
And the power of a line of dialogue, like, let me give you one. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. This is a line from Gone with the Wind.
Clark
Yep.
Gable.
Now, I've never watched that movie, but I've heard that line so many times, it's stuck in my mind. That movie was filmed 9 decades ago.
Amazing.
It
Yeah.
is.
Amazing.
Powerful.
Yep. Yep.
Another one, Nobody Puts Baby in the Corner. This is from Dirty Dancing. That movie is stuck in the zeitgeist of the American mind because that movie was so powerful. So storytelling really is a neat medium to spread a message,
Yep.
and it sticks around a long time. That's why I'm involved in it.
Do you think that if you look back at those films, and okay, I know it's generational, so let be clear on that, because obviously the next generation isn't going to be moved by E.T., okay? Like, because E.T. didn't come out in their time. But that those stories back then were less agenda-driven and more story-driven. Like, there wasn't an agenda in the story. It was just, how well could you tell the story? Or do you think there was still a propaganda and a lot of agenda?
I think there was agenda back then. I don't know if it was so on the nose or so front and center as it is today. I think there was an agenda in Dirty Dancing. I think there was probably an agenda in E.T. I could see that. It's more apparent today because everybody's loud and there's billions of talking heads everywhere. And once somebody latches onto a narrative, it spreads. And then somebody makes a movie about it. I don't think things were as viral back then, obviously, but I do think there were agendas. I think there's more now.
I'm wondering, and it makes me ask the question, where are things more effective when they're more subliminal, more subtext, as opposed to just in your face, on the nose, or screaming it in everybody's face? Is it kind of a sustainability? Does it go a little deeper? And is it,
Do you think it sticks around longer?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
if it's not so in your face. So like there's things that go viral today. Okay. There's things that are hot today. There's things that become, the popular show. But what you're talking about is totally different than that. What you're talking about is a true impression that stays around for decades.
Absolutely.
Do you think agenda can push that, or it has to be derived from a true story?
I think the anchor of something that's going to stick around for generations is going to be a well-told story. It's not going to be somebody trying to push an agenda. First of all, if you want to find an agenda, you can find it. You just go somewhere that's teaching it, right?
Yeah.
But when we watch movies and we listen to storytellers, we're not looking for that. We're looking for an escape.
right.
Yep.
Right? We're looking to be
100%.
dazzled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%, which is what I think as an art we have lost sight of in the industry to some degree.
Yeah.
And I think there's, a lot of films that are trying to push agendas to get dollars, to gain the influence, to win the, game. You just didn't have, have that. I mean, we all only had a television.
Right.
That was it.
Right.
Your story had to be told on one television. Nobody was fighting over who was going to get that. It was, whoever was going to watch the one TV in the house, right? And I mean, and everybody enjoyed going on the journeys, fishing with the Andy Griffith Show and I Love Lucy, and they just told household stories.
Sure.
These agenda-driven films, people are trying to hack the market.
Yeah.
They're hacks. That's the way Robert McKee would define them. And I believe that you don't go fishing for an audience. You go, true storytellers are trying to tell the very best story. They're not trying to connect to a specific audience and hack them. You can't make something that's multi-generational by hacking into an audience.
Yeah.
The market
because
has
the generation
to accept it.
changes.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess that's part of my curiosity here is the fact of if you're still relevant multiple generations later, what was the fundamental of that?
They're finding the story.
Yes.
They're attracted to the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not these, and I think that's in faith films in one genre, it's so agenda driven that the story's lost. Which is not where we miss the mark on relatability and staying around forever and ever. If we could hone in on storytelling and the story happens to have great attributes in it, we'll stay around far longer than making sure we have this line, there's a Bible on the table, there's this many scriptures, there's this many things. That's trying to intercede an agenda into a story instead of letting the story be what transcends and letting that story originate from the creator, right?
I think I believe you as a filmmaker, a writer, whatever it is you're creating, you sound your own note is what you should be doing. You sound your note. And then the people that harmonize with that, who get that, who can hear that sound, come around and want to hear more. It resonates with them, as opposed to, as we're saying, hack, the thing. You create that. They find you. You don't have to go find them per se in terms of the art side of it, or the agenda driven, or, whatever the case may be. I love this language. This is you're talking my lane now. I think there's a lot to be said. For me, and this is personal, but So there's so many platforms now. There's like,
Sure.
now there's room for every kind of creator. You want to be a agenda-driven guy? Well, you can go do that. I'm sure you'll find yourself a
Yep.
audience doing
Yep.
whatever, because there's so many places to put
Yep.
things. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
But I personally, I just appreciate it when people are entertainers are being entertainers.
Yep.
And they, leave all the other stuff, out of it. Like you alluded to earlier, it used to be an escape. It's a place to get to and
Yes.
escape and go enjoy and forget about all that stuff. Don't bring all that stuff back into entertainment. People do that. I get it. That's, people can create how they want to, but I appreciate it when we leave all that out. Or you go back to like something really old school and you gotta dig in deep to see the subtext, or you take like an old Planet of the Apes, like those movies. Some of those things were all these political subtexts for what was going on in the era, but it was never so on the nose. It was just like, it was giving their audience more credit, that they would understand things, even if they didn't know why. They would resonate with them because that's what was happening in society and culture, without having to say, here's what I'm talking about, or whatever the case may be. But love it. So, okay, so you went through your promotional stuff. You did your the TV show, the TV series, and you've gotten into more writing. Would you say more recently? What's been the drive more recently? What has been your focus? Would you say?
Well, I write novels and I write self-help books. I've written 5 total. I'm writing a script now.
Okay.
But I do think storytellers make up the fabric of culture. That's why I'm in it.
That's true.
That's why I'm in it. So I'm drawn to telling a meaningful story. And so that's what I'm doing now, whether I'm acting in a movie or a TV show or writing a script. I'm trying to tell a story that's going to move someone. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the detective genre, especially murder mystery stuff, because I think it's the highest stakes story. I think it is the highest stakes highest stakes of a story you can tell. You're dealing with life and death, and who did this horrendous thing, and how are we going to find justice in it? So those are the stories that I like to tell. I've written 3 novels with detectives, and the screenplay I'm writing is a detective genre. So
Wow, I love it.
Yeah, that's also a very strategic, story. A detective story is, because you're rewinding, the end and the beginning. So now you're filling in like all the finite details, and you can just go crazy on that, right? I mean, you can be like, from the fingerprints to the footsteps to the mind behind it to the relationships. I mean, just all the details that go into the murder mysteries, and it's the subtext, so much subtext, right?
Even just like I would imagine the traditional inciting incident in a murder mystery is a murder happens. Is that probably, I'm just going to throw a fictitious number, 90% of the time how a movie begins?
usually.
Yeah. But I mean, there could be, there has to be like some interesting creative ways of getting there, other ways. A guy is preparing for a murder the entire movie, to a said point, but he's not, but does he get there? Somebody picks on him before he even gets there and sees that he's planning it. I don't know. There's like, that's a cool, like, that's just there's all kind of paths, to go with that whole thing. So I happened to notice that you carried into this production set today a big old book next to you.
Yeah, and what's cool is people were pointing it out.
They were pointing it out.
Yeah, they were saying, "Oh, who's reading this?"
Who's reading that book? Yeah.
It's known in the industry, but for people that don't know it, I wanted to bring it as a show and tell book, and that's this book. It's by Robert McKee. It's called Story, and people call it the Bible of screenwriting. Okay. And I think it can benefit any storyteller, whether they're actors or writers or directors or editors, because it's packed with so many nuggets of wisdom. I mean, it is incredible.
It is.
And I have a quote that's on my pinup board by my desk. I wanted to read it. And I keep this up there to remind me of how powerful stories are. But it says, this is a quote from the book. It says, "For above all else, beyond imagination and skill, what the world asks of you is courage. Courage to risk rejection, ridicule, and failure. As you follow the quest for stories told with meaning and beauty, study thoughtfully, but write boldly. Then, like the hero of the fable, your dance will dazzle the world." Now that's
so good.
skewed to writers, but
Yeah.
any storyteller.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
And yeah.
I've heard you, it's been my approach. It was something I heard long ago, kind of worked for me, but that you write your first draft from your heart, and then you write your second draft from your head. You know, you write your first draft, you just get it all out. You know, you're going to change stuff. Don't worry about it. You just get started and you just do it. Psychologically, it's good to get something done and accomplished, and you write it as fast as you can. And you just write. And you get the whole thing out, and you're finally like, all right, I got a whole movie. It might suck, but I got the idea out. And then I can go back with my head and start writing the thing and making it make sense, or changing it about, or, you know, whatever the case may be. I don't know. What, do you have a process?
I do have a process, and you said it. I mean, you have to know the inciting incident. You have to know the beginning and the end. You have to know who your villain is, and then you can color all the details.
Yep.
I get more structured than that. Like I use some stuff from John Truby and the other kind of, but I like to fill my head with all the technique and then write.
Yep.
And not necessarily have it plotted out, but I know the principles, so it can come out in a structured way, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's creativity in its finest, right? I mean, creativity, you take all the mediums that are around, like everything that's in here, and then you say, okay, now I'm going to create what I would create would be different than what you would create or you would recreate, even though we all have the same materials within the room, right? I learned that in interior design when I did design. I said to Dan Rubottom, who's helping digitize our studio logo for our feature film that we have coming out. He said, "Okay, Amber, what kind of design are you thinking of?" And we talked a lot, but I was like, "Dan, I have no idea your world. Like, I don't even know what you're creating with. Like, I don't even know what my possibilities are. I can just say, yeah, I can say some things I might like, but I still don't even know if that's possible to even do what I'm saying."
Because she's talking a motion graphic. So in an animated motion world, what's the language? A ray of light, a texture, a light thingy, a what?
Yeah,
what is
what does that even look like? 3D, 2D, move, like how does it move? And he's like, "Well, do you want 3D? Do you want this?" And I'm like, I have no idea. He's like, "Well, what you showed me was," and I was like, "Oh, I'm not saying I have to have that either. I'm just saying I don't know actually really what I want. Can you create me something?" And of course he created something that just knocks it out of the park. Great. But I mean, he knows what all he's creating with. I think you kind of have to look at what are you, like we can all fill our brains full of like systems and ways and concepts and ideas. But at the end of the day, what we regurgitate out is the creative process.
Totally.
That's what makes it so great.
And I think in some ways what we're alluding to here is the structure or the form or the tools.
Yeah.
You got to know
The parameters.
some of it to start. Can you break them? Yeah, you can break them. You know, but you got to know, you got to have something to start with. You got to have you want to film something, you got to have a camera. We know you're going to have that.
Yeah.
You know, what are you going to put it on? You're going to hold it? It's going to be hand, you know, there's some framework to begin with, like everything that Robert teaches and that your process and, you know, that you're talking about insinuates. You got to have, there's got to be a basic form, and probably it works for you most of the time, or change it up. I don't know.
And we know a lot of form intuitively, and when it's called out by the pros, then we go, oh wow, that's the reason that story works.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's good to be able to recognize why stories work when you're watching them.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, one of the guys over around here, I think it was Matt, said, "Yeah, I don't read that book. It's ruined movies for me," because you can see the process in which the storyline's going to go.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, those of us that are intuitive to the industry and not even reading the books. Like, I think if you're in this industry or you have stepped into this industry, you kind of have a knack for it, so to speak.
That's
Like,
true.
it's kind of like if you love finances and you end up in the financial world, right? If you're creative, so when you go to a movie, you're like, "Oh yeah, she's dying, like in the first 5 minutes.
Right.
Like you can just see the story arc
Right.
in the beginning because you know the structure of that, and you didn't even study it or anything. You just kind of can
It's the world we live in.
kind of predict certain things because you know what makes a good story. Maybe because you've been a storyteller your whole life and you've never even studied it as a form. But then, like what you said, you study it and you're like, oh my
Or you've
gosh.
watched 1,000 movies, and because you've watched 1,000 movies, you actually gave yourself an education and had no idea. You're a big movie watcher out there. You don't know anything what we're talking about. You actually got really educated on movies, and you don't even know it.
Yep.
You don't speak the language, but you know what we're talking about if we were to go in there and
Break
start
it down.
breaking it down. Like, I guarantee you, we say things like inciting incident. What's an inciting incident? Well, every movie that you watch, probably almost every movie you watch, starts by taking someone who has nothing and giving them everything, or taking somebody who has everything and taking it all away. And then they spend the rest of the movie trying to regain order to get things back to where they were before. Like somehow it causes someone's life to go into chaos, good or bad, and order is restored over the whole course. I mean, that's generally most movies that you watch. Now, you've seen that all the time, but you didn't know that was an inciting incident that started us there. And then it can get even more precise. What is the actual inciting incident? That a car crash, that someone die, et cetera, someone win the lottery. That started to create this pandemonium that now we want to watch it because there's drama and we want to participate, right? I mean, but you as hearing that now, you're like, oh yeah, I do recognize that does happen in all the movies I watch. It's just we have an educated audience, and we have an educated movie watching audience.
Yeah, for sure.
And we probably don't give as much credit to as we should.
Speaking to creators, I heard this from a guy named Frederick Heron. He said, when we're creating, we're most like God. I heard that maybe 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 10. And I thought, whoa, that's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful.
I think
about that.
Yeah. I think all of us have that ability to create. I think the world tells us creativity only looks like this. But I've sat with a lot of brilliant engineers, mathematicians that are not in the arts at all. And they're creating the softwares, the software programs that we use. They're creating the mics. They're creating, they're engineering, like all these. That's creating.
Yeah.
It's just the world doesn't call it creating. The world calls it an invention in their world. And in our world, they call it creation, that we created something. It's all creating, everything that you see in this podcast was created by
That's true.
man.
That's true.
And so by nature, we are creators. It's what we do.
Totally.
It's just what industry do you create in?
That's a fact.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Tell us.
The power of a story to help you escape. I was deployed to Iraq when I was 20. And I was a Navy Corpsman, so we ran around with the Marines. So we were like getting ready for combat. And when we got into country, I had 2 buddies. One of my buddies, his nickname was the Muffin Man. There's reasons for it. Another guy, he was nicknamed the Squirrel. We would leave our tents and we would take our cots out under the Iraq stars, put up our mosquito netting, and the Squirrel would tell me and the Muffin Man stories that were so outlandish that we would laugh out loud to the point where people in the tents were yelling at us, shut up, go to sleep. And we would completely escape right there, being, around enemy fire.
Yep.
We would totally escape and laugh ourselves to sleep.
Yeah.
So if you can provide that escape for somebody, it can be very powerful.
Yep.
And I think that's why people almost seek asylum in stories.
Sure.
Yeah.
They escape this crazy political dumpster fire we're in. And they look to stories to get them away for a while. And that's how powerful stories are. It's a true art.
Yeah.
It's so true.
It is so true. And it's from the beginning of time, right? Like every little kid would go to bed. What do they say? Tell me a story.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right? Tell me a story.
And it goes further than that. We got caveman drawings on walls of people telling stories, passing their history down through story.
And Jesus was a
storyteller. All his parables, that's one of the most brilliant ways to get something, for someone
across.
to receive something. It bypasses the intellect. It's intuitive. It goes deep. It like that creativity opens up something in you that's that's not normally opened up from just a step-by-step or someone preaching
Yeah.
at you or something like that. It opens something up in a fresh way. You know, it disarms you.
Yeah.
It causes you to lean in, especially with good. That's why I love you writers so much, because of the subtext you throw in there. Because I know you're telling me something that you're not really telling me.
Yeah.
Or you're telling me something that you are, you know, and I have to
Yeah.
lean in. I'm like, well, what are you saying? And you're opening something up in me, you know, that I'm like, oh my gosh, that just hit me so much deeper than if you just would have told me, like Jesus in the Bible.
Yeah.
Many times, the parable. Wait, why don't you just tell us? Speak plainly. And it was in his case, I think it was a real dividing line between those who are really going to get it and listen and want to and lean in, and those who wouldn't. He would. I think it was on purpose. He's a master storyteller, you know. But you know, in our case, gosh, I just appreciate it. You know, I appreciate it so much.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay? What were you gonna say?
I was gonna. Well, no, you go ahead. No, we have. Okay, I'll go ahead. Okay, so what is your, you know, you're acting, you're writing, you're doing several things. So what's your favorite part? Let's just talk writing. We're on that vein right now.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part in that process? What gets you going? What?
I like creating stories. I like the writing part of things, because all of us have a story to tell. All of us have gone through these crucibles in life, and that's what we draw from. We draw from our experience, other stories we've told, and we can craft something. And I think all of us are interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure,
and some people go to the grave with their stories locked up in them. So telling a story in a meaningful way, creating an environment, creating emotion from characters, I think that's a lot of fun. And I draw from all inspiration. I draw some from, you know, religion. One of my books was about bad religion. Kind of think of like a movie about bad religion. I can think of a movie called Seven, which is about bad religion. And so we can draw from all types of, and I had a very bad experience when I was a kid with bad religion. And my idea of God was somebody who is waiting for you to step over the line so he can crush you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that stuff is terrible.
Yeah.
And that's why so many people run from religion.
Yeah.
And so anyway, telling meaningful stories is what I like. I mean, I love creating.
That's awesome. You know, I don't know if it was you that, I feel like it was you bringing the story up, or I feel like it was. There was somebody with I think they were a musician, or they had a sound in them. There was something about not dying with the sound. That sound with them. Is that ringing a bell at all? There was like there was music in them, and it was about.
Oh yeah. Well, it was about Biggie Smalls, who died, who had wrote a song for Pepsi. And when he died, Pepsi could no longer do anything with the song because he had died. So it's been in their vault for years and years and years, this song that's been written. And because of technology today and the brilliance of engineers that have created digital avatars are going to bring back to life Biggie Smalls to sing his song for Pepsi and do a Pepsi commercial for them. So, I mean, even though Biggie had written it, he had never performed it, sang it, or anything, and they owned that IP. No one could because it was in his estate to be sung by him. So by recreating him in digital avatar ways, we'll get to hear that song, you know, that they wrote. But I mean, that's
Isn't that wild? Like you could, but give a voice to someone who can't speak anymore. I mean, how do you? I mean, there's some storytelling for you right there.
yeah. They're digitizing his voice to exactly how he sounded,
Right.
and they've already done it in a lot of ways for a lot of people, and that will be our future as well in filmmaking.
Sure.
You know, I mean, we're going to go to things that I don't know how we tell what is real and what is fake. World.
We'll be able to tell.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll have an ornate sense about us, but we will because we grew up knowing different. But what about the kids? Like my daughter doesn't know life without a cell phone.
Right. Yeah.
She doesn't. her kids don't know life without a filter.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
I mean, they're now getting all these ways to, if you have a avatar that you can say, I want to be 18 years old on this and I don't ever want to age. And your avatar is the one that calls everybody and you don't ever have to really phone people, but your avatar is. This is what I mean. Like
Sure.
that all they know, like we're going to go to the Jetsons here for a hot minute, right? Like that kind of world, I think, yes, we have an ornate thing inside of us to know what is real and what is fake. But I think our world's getting inherently more and more barriers that get behind or step in front of what is real and what is fake. And that's why I think we have a generation so hungry for authenticness, like to be authenticated, right? Like you want to be authentic in what you do. They're just like, no, I don't want you to teach me like you used to could teach and then have all these bullet points and you got to do all these Bible studies and you got to do all these things. They're like, no, like I want to see it myself from you. Like I want to touch you. I want to know for you. Like because there's so much of their world that's.
You know what? I think we can only play that out so far, and here's why. I went to seminary, and I've studied the Bible, and Proverbs says a man who isolates wars against himself. So I think today more than ever, we have a lot of isolation going on, and people long for connection. So much so that they're going to be listening in on this conversation between three people, feeling connected to us because they're hearing our words. And I think people are so disconnected right now that we're going to have almost kind of like a whiplash effect where people, they break the chains of the social media stuff and the isolation that's going on and the filters because they're longing for human connection. I really do think that that's going to happen because we can't be disconnected from humans.
Right.
Yeah.
We will become depressed and
Yeah.
will hurt in life. It hurts us.
Yeah, I completely agree that we were made for human relationships. And I mean, there's all kinds of studies on life for the human touch and babies and all of that. You know, the statistics, I could think of like 10 stories just off the top of my head right now on that very thing. And I agree, isolation is a breeding ground for a lot of implosion, just like what Proverbs says. But I also think too that I'm watching a generation grow up that they get all of their relationships through a digital device. That's what they know as relationship. They know, like, my friend likes me or not from a thumbs up, or how many likes I get, or, you know, that's their meter. We didn't grow up even having anything like that, you know, so they'll have to find a way. Like now, I'm sure, like my grandmother used to always tell me, you're so wasteful. You just throw everything away, because she lived through the Depression. You didn't throw anything away. You know, like, oh, this is just terrible. Your generation is just so, it's like, right, that's always, we're going to always be saying that about the generation behind us and the go on and go on. But if you do look at it as scripture, I mean, I say if you get to Revelations, we're not getting any better. But I do think that those of us that study truth will know truth, as no matter what evolves in time.
Sure.
I think truth will recognize truth.
Absolutely. All right. I'm gonna because I know we're gonna start running short on time.
Yeah, because we are.
I want to I have to draw this parallel because I thought of it when you were saying that.
Okay.
When you were talking about, you know, them bringing Biggie. So the story I was thinking of was actually a different story. But that was a good story.
Okay.
That was a good story. So the bringing Biggie, really bringing him back to life, like giving him a voice. Like as a writer, tell me that's not cool that you can give someone a voice who's might be dead. Maybe it's historical. And so you're giving them a voice now, which is astounding. Yeah. That like something maybe they did that was amazing, you're bringing to a screen now to affect people now that might even, like, dare I say, bring them fruit in eternity after they're already there because of what they have, the voice that their story left in the earth. I mean,
their legacy.
That's crazy. That's just some crazy stuff going on there. I'm just saying that we can do. But I mean, you love telling real people stories, that you love that. You know what I mean? That you are if nothing else, say they're still alive, giving voice to someone who doesn't know how to tell a story, who doesn't know how to write, but they live the story.
Yep.
And they want the world to be affected by what they have learned, but they had no way of getting out. What a responsibility. Like what a gift the writer is to the earth, to be able to do that. Someone had to be the Levite. Someone had to be the one writing and task, everything that was, happening. That's a pretty awesome thing.
It is.
The story I was thinking of was, I still don't remember who told the story, but at the end of the day, it was about this, it was about a musician or something. And the whole point of the story was, he had this music inside of him that he was really just never able to play. And so he ultimately died with his music inside of him, never letting it out. And I'm like, how many people have a story, have something in them, but whether they just didn't take the time to learn the mechanics of storytelling or musicianry or whatever it is, to get, the thing out, like how important, is that for people to be able to do that, be able to tell their story in somehow, some shape, form, wherever they're coming from.
That's what I was going to say is I think a lot of times storytelling becomes one, you have to be vulnerable to tell that story, whatever, especially if it's your own story. Two is just like everybody, because we measure differently here, like, well, then if I tell my story, it needs to be like this massive hit, right? Or doesn't validate my story. But what if your story was just supposed to be told for the one person that needed to hear your story? Is that not valid enough? Would you be vulnerable enough to tell your story if it gave one person hope? Because I guarantee everybody on this planet told their story, a person would find hope from your story.
Yeah.
But because we measure what we tell by and our vulnerability by of how big of an impact can we have with our story, instead of I just think my stories needs to be recorded in time, so maybe somebody reads it later, or maybe one person changes. And to put that into perspective, what if you had a babysitter who you poured into because it was just one person sitting around, and maybe that person didn't have a mom and a dad and a good upbringing, had been abused and other things, and had no parenting skills whatsoever, and had no marital advice of any kind. All the family had ended up in different ways and gelled and all kinds of stuff. And what if you just shared your story with that one person? That one person learned from you, heard about the gospel, the love of Jesus, ended up getting married and having a healthy family and having 3 children and raising those kids to love Jesus, going on and they do things in the world. That one person multiplied to 4 people that were loving, kind, good humans because you took the time to just tell your story and share your story with one person. That's the impact of telling your story.
Sure.
Your story truly has an impact on other people's trajectory of life. And that is huge. But see, we want to go, well, I don't tell my story unless like millions are going to be impacted, or some more than just one person's going to care. That's not enough, like more than my grandmother. But what if your grandmother told her story, right? Like it's just this parallel of one.
We did an interview earlier today, and a lady talked about, searching for, or listening to a guy. I don't know if it was a coach or whatnot online, but he was talking, and when she finally heard this guy, she was like, he articulated everything I had always felt in my heart, but didn't know how to articulate it. Thank you. How much of the time does the writer do that for people? They're like, that is it. People who do that with music, that's my story. Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah, and there's no such thing as a good, perfect story, right? You have to have this point in the story that's real. Like for people see us on this soundstage and think, these guys got it great. Yeah, they can get up there, talk about telling stories, but they don't see all the junk and the tragedy we've gone through and stuff like that. For example, I'm getting ready to hit my 10-year sober anniversary. My life was a disaster before that. I mean, I wasn't in the gutter.
Right.
But I was a mess.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't gone through that, I mean, if I hadn't gotten sober, who knows where things would be, but thank God I surrendered.
Yeah.
And he's helped me tell stories.
Yeah.
He's encouraged me to tell stories. So my point is, everyone has a story.
Yep.
Maybe you're not the storyteller, but if you are the storyteller, don't leave out the junk. Don't leave out the crucible, because that's how people relate to us.
Yeah.
If somebody who's struggling with drinking stumbles across this interview and goes, oh man, I connect with that guy because he had to go through AA, he had to get sober, and he was able to do it, and now he's doing great things.
Yep.
Everybody has challenges.
Yep.
So if you're going to tell a
100%.
story, include that crucible. That's how people relate. They don't relate to the perfect story.
Well, that's redemption.
Yeah, it is.
Without adversity, how do you redeem?
Sure.
Like, we cannot just always show redemption without some sort of overcoming adversity
Totally.
to get to the redemption.
Right.
But okay, us storytellers at this time could tell stories till the world looked level, but I want to give Terry the opportunity to tell our viewers, how do they get in touch with you? How do they follow you? All of that.
TerryWeaverBooks.com. That's where I put out a lot. If you go into Substack, you can find me. That's where I write. I write a lot on Substack. And then all the social media platforms, and check out Breaking Strongholds, a TV series. You can watch that on Prime. And there's a new movie called Parallel the Triad coming out next year. So there's some ways.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Wow.
Well, Terry, it's been fun. I know you Kelly's like, don't make it be over.
Just starting.
Don't make it be over. He loves us. The director in him and the storytelling in him loves this. So
And it took me like half the interview just to get into like the good stuff. I was like, oh, now we're really getting.
Yeah, let me leave you guys with a quote. I heard this and I keep on repeating it to myself. It reminds me to be courageous. It's a quote by Anais Nin. It says, life expands and contracts in proportion to our courage. Life expands and contracts in proportion to our courage. I think that'll help some people.
yeah, I do too.
It's good.
So be courageous today and go look up Terry so you can learn more about being courageous and follow all his journey. Kelly, it's been fun.
Yes, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Kelly Leger.
Amber Buto and Terry Weaver.
And
Thank
Terry
you so
Weaver.
much for being here today.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Until then, we'll see you on Set Live.